The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone, to the Operational Technology Cybersecurity Best Practices Clinic from Fortinet. We are so glad you joined us today and hope to make the next 30 minutes a productive interaction for you. Let's jump right in. As we think about this Best Practice Clinic, it is the culmination of 3 topics that come up on a regular basis when we talk to our industrial counterparts about securing their environments. And the focus of those best practices are our first session today covering visibility, knowing that you can't protect what you can't see, and it's an important foundation in operational technology to have visibility into your environment so you can provide the necessary security. Our next session covers control, and that's about enforcing security across the network. And our third and final session in this series covers situational awareness or actionable intelligence built on continuous analysis. So our 3 sessions will be covered in the next 3 weeks. And I'd like to just take a minute to introduce you to the speakers that will be a part of our session. Before we meet our speakers, let me just cover a couple of housekeeping. Most of you have asked questions, do I get a copy of the presentation? Where are those slides? And there's a widget in your console within the GoToWebinar platform, and it's called Handouts, and you'll find 2 handouts as a part of today's session. One is a copy of the best practice visibility handout, so that's our slides that our speaker will cover. The second is a short ebook on the topic of OT network security, starting with visibility. So feel free to download those assets and share them with your colleagues as you learn more about our topic today. Second, questions are always welcome. There is another widget inside the console in GoToWebinar where you can submit questions, and we'll have time at the end of the session to cover as many as possible. And third, yes, we do record these sessions so you can listen again. There's always a nice way to either share the recording or listen again if you miss some important points along the journey. Next up, meet our speakers. The first of our speaker covering today's topic is Rick Peters. He is the CISO, or Chief Information Security Officer, for our operational technology practice in North America. Our next up, 2 speakers covering our follow-on 2 topics, Carlos Sanchez and Michelle Balderson, both subject matter experts for operational technology at Fortinet. You'll have a chance to meet them in the coming weeks. I'm now going to turn the session over to Rick. A little bit about Rick before I hand him over the keys. Rick has been with Fortinet for about 3.5 years, and his focus while here has been 100% on our commitment to cybersecurity for OT. But prior to joining Fortinet, Rick spent almost 40 years with the intelligence community, working both offense and defense. I'm certain he has a number of stories he could or could not share with us based on that experience, but he's seen a lot of shifts in cybersecurity for OT based on his time at the NSA and now with Fortinet. So welcome, Rick, as our speaker today.
Hey, thanks, Cheryl, and thank you to everyone who's taking a few minutes out of their busy schedules today to listen in to a clinic. I like that term. You know, it's precise, and so we're going to try and be precise today. Talk about a subject I'm pretty passionate about, and but before we do that, I think it's often best to get a sense of the audience disposition with respect to the topic, and so we have a poll here, and Cheryl will speak to the mechanics of it here in just a moment, but basically we're asking a simple question: how confident are you with the visibility of the devices, users, and applications on your network? And the answers are pretty straightforward. You can pick 1 through 4, and again, this is just to get a feel for your situation, your posture with respect to your business or industry. And I think regardless today, everyone probably is going to walk away with something new. I will try and share some insights and some storytelling that may illuminate ideas or angles you may not have thought about before. And we're going to do that in 25 minutes, and that will be interesting. How are we doing, Cheryl? Do we have some data?
We have some data, so let me share with the audience the results of our poll. So How confident are you with the visibility of devices, users, and applications on your network? First category was no confidence. We don't know what we don't know. 14% of our audience chose that option. Limited confidence, 53% of our audience chose that. For the third category, somewhat confident, 28% of our audience chose that. And there is a lucky 5% who said, I am 100% confident and continue to monitor with tools to maintain that visibility.
You know, I'm not a big gambler, but that I would safely bet that 2 and 3 would have gotten the lion's share of the vote. And I think that's reflective of what's going on today across the industry for operational technology. And we'll explore as to the why. I think that's, everybody has an appetite for that. So let's move right into this. And as we start the journey, I think let's do it with a foundational premise, which might seem intuitive, right? Obviously, with visibility, you can't secure what you can't see, so let's do something about it. And while it might seem intuitive enough, you know, I think to accomplish less would almost seem careless. You know, there are some reasons though why it's specifically unique and important for OT. You know, the challenges of OT kind of make the landscape a bit more complicated. And I'll give you some examples, right? We're talking about a difference in value systems. You know, safety and system availability are paramount in OT. Not that security isn't important, but it takes a second or third seat compared to the value of sustained trusted operations. And of course, the language or the protocol use in this environment can be different. And likewise, you encounter hardware and software you may not have seen for decades. If you're in the IT world and you're suddenly having to interface with a system that's XP based, you're scratching your head saying, wow, how is it that I'm still finding that kind of hardware or software out in the field? Welcome to the world of OT. And so we're going to peel that back to see, how can you protect what you can't see? Let's get on board with this idea of building trust as we move forward. Think a way to examine that, and we're going to focus here on that leftmost columns today. I like to characterize these as risk accelerants, but they really let us focus and derive the why. Let's really talk about that. And to the left, we're talking about the digital attack surface. What do we mean by that? We're really conveying this notion of growth in the enabled device landscape, Internet of Things, Industrial Internet of Things, terminology that's not new anymore. And then we're applying this idea of how do we trust these assets? You know, the idea of earned trust for clients, devices, and applications is absolute. If we're going to get our hands around the problem and we want to attack visibility, that becomes our focal point. But we've got some challenges working against us today in this world. Some of them relatively new. In 2020, there was, of course, rapid innovation in the first quarter as the pandemic got the front seat and everyone needed to adjust to this new way of doing business. And of course, operational technology didn't get a free pass. So work from home became the way folks needed to adjust to a new business model. On top of that, the growth alone in enabled devices. And in fact, at Fortinet, we use survey data to try and project not just where we are today, but where we might anticipate being in the very near future. And latest data says by 2025, almost 4 billion IIoT devices just in the OT space. So when you think about manufacturing, energy and utilities, and transportation, you now think about enabled surfaces. You know, that sophisticated attack column, I want to just make one point to that because I think it's important in line with visibility. And that is, you know, the adversary playbook often relies on legacy tradecraft. It's all about getting access, gaining target access. You know, the recent events that caught so much attention in the supply chain risk area attached to SolarWinds illustrated again the patience of an adversary to get on the target with a payload, to do a lot of reconnaissance, and then to use that as a vehicle to proliferate out to a wide variety of targets, and then once on target to do privilege escalation by leveraging backdoors, IT backdoors, to get malware on the target, and then accomplish a whole array of campaigns. So the stakes are high, and we've got a lot up we're going to peel back and examine. But just some illustrations, I think, important that reinforce this idea that data is definitely the commodity of interest today, is why visibility is so important. This idea of disrupting business is profitable. You know, we're talking today about impacts in the tens of millions to even $1 billion or more. So the techniques and the tradecraft being used by those adversaries, those bad actors, to accomplish their profit motivation often start with extortion, right? Those phishing attacks and ransomware. The terminology many of us know today, WannaCry, NotPetya, Locker Gaga. You know, in the past, these might have not have been nearly well known as they are today. But then you have to really think about what is it that the purposeful bad actor is trying to accomplish. And that, coming back to that data being the commodity of interest, it's really going after industrial espionage or your intellectual property, stealing that intellectual property, your trade secrets or your crown jewels, the things that separate you or differentiate you from your competition. That becomes very important to the intruder who is going to try and gain from gaining that access. And then on the occasion, there's that illustration of the ability to even sabotage the environment, you know, to affect your value in the market space, public perception, even danger to the workforce or the customers. So much going on out there. You know, this literal example of the municipal situation as a water treatment function down in the Southeast here just recently, again, demonstrating the propensity and the ability of adversaries to accomplish so much. Visibility, truly, truly important today. And we really can illustrate that this with the nature of the unbounded network, right? As opposed to the finite environment that many try to traditionally think about with operational technology. We're really forced to think about trust and accountability. It starts with a foundation, though, of cybersecurity best practices and a focus on visibility. So let's take a look at a framework. And I think it's important to adopt a strategy or a security framework to help us think about the maturity as we start from the foundation and move towards something that's more robust. You know, the NIST cybersecurity framework gives us a way to break that down. From identification to recovery, it really moves us into a domain of thinking about continuous trust, continuous visibility, and a way to interpret what's going on. Because after all, it is ultimately about achieving situational awareness, but starts with visibility. We've got to understand what's going on in our environment and feel confident at any moment in time that we are in control. So let's start to really drill down on this, and let's think about that first tier identification, right? We're really now looking at, we really need to understand what is connected to our environment at any point in time. You know, the key takeaway, that asset inventory, knowing what you have, seems again to be intuitive, but there are drivers and challenges in that in trying to accomplish that very function. From IT/OT, shared response and connectivity, we know today that we're asking experts to work together who traditionally don't necessarily get along, but the end game is they must work collaboratively, have to agree on the value and what must be delivered to the OT client. Likewise, the asset owners today, we've talked just briefly about supply chain considerations, but there are so many trusted partners in the OT industry that we have to be able to design in and think about trust at a level maybe we haven't before, because all of that connected interactivity, that movement of information and data and intelligence provide perhaps an opportunity for the adversary to get on target. So starting with asset inventory and knowing what we have at any moment in time, absolute is a step towards gaining that visibility. Taking one more step and moving towards the protection of what it is we're trying to see, let's think about the use of our next generation firewall as kind of the foundation here. What we're really after is rules of engagement, understanding what it means to enforce and recognize and trust clients, devices, and applications, recognizing that it is a dynamic challenge. You can take a snapshot at this moment in time, and less than a second later, the domain changes. So this is a moving target. We have to think in that dynamic. We have to employ known techniques as a deterrent. We have to think about things like multi-factor authentication, because at the end of the day, we're talking about using that next generation firewall as a means to interrogate and enforce earned trust. It really is about readiness of the asset to do business. So that's our focal point. Turning our attention then to another kind of visibility, let's talk about traffic visibility. We just spent a few seconds talking about devices. When we think about traffic visibility and profiling, now we're talking about raising the bar to evaluate trust, to do some analysis, to see the data, and seeing data requires a persistent use of techniques to unwrap and evaluate what's going on traffic-wise. In order to understand, one must be fluent in operational technology. It's an industrial language recognized by by inspecting traffic and developing behaviors, we can characterize those range of behaviors that we trust. But we have to be able to speak that language. So that 1,800 number of signatures illustrates the growth and the continual aspects of the industrial environment that are unique from IT. So we have to be able to think about inspection points and blocking threats, which have a different focus from the traditional IT. But it is, at the end of the day, not unusual to think about the key takeaway being very much aligned with what we've done in IT, and that is rigorous inspection at the speed of business. Again, tying back the notion of understanding what's happening in my environment from moment to moment and recognizing that situational awareness and safety and continuous operations being number one. Again, that makes sense to think about being on top of that 24/7. Well, the fourth step that we'll look at here is kind of elevating, and I'll call it the final step for visibility. It's understanding cybersecurity maturation from the standpoint of maintaining trust. Now, we've talked about establishing devices and traffic and understand what's going on, but we need to be able to leverage threat intelligence that can be provided to our next generation firewall to keep it current. Understanding that signatures change, the domain changes out there. So those known signature bases, as well as zero-day activities, those behaviors we haven't seen before, and perhaps even thinking about understanding the activities that are out of scope for what I would consider to be normal. I might have an insider conducting operations or activities that are not conducive or in the best interest of the business. So I now need to kind of move away from the traditional mindset of security and be more proactive, starting to think inside out. And visibility says, hey, I'm attending to the edges. I'm attending to the devices, earning the trust, but I now also have to have visibility of that traffic that's within my environment, so I truly understand behaviorally what's happening at any moment in time. The beauty of what Fortinet has done and their kind of the value of their solution space applied to operational technology is that it's already a familiar space for IT. It's then taking the value of Fortinet's ecosystem for visibility specifically as a key component of continuous trust. So you think about 24/7. That thread in there about broad visibility for the entire attack surface means I'm on top of my game. And our security fabric approach offers a more proactive approach to defending the cyber physical assets that represents substantial investment. And remember, I mentioned before intellectual property, but we're also talking about the physical plant itself, which often represents an enormous investment. And I have to be recognizing any kind of a behavior that threatens the integrity of that landscape. You know, if we want to derive and align the functions that fit into the security fabric, a great way to look at it is to realize that visibility is a cross-cutting challenge. Love the fact that we're looking at sustained trust again that is enabled with visibility. So you see under zero trust access there, endpoint protection, network access control, identity, and even multi-factor authentication. All elements that, again, all about designing, achieving visibility and understanding and earning that trust that we must have. Agility and enforcement within the security network driven area. We've talked about our firewall capability. We'll talk about some features within that firewall in just a minute. The next generation firewall is, you might argue, the core of what happens in our security fabric, but it extends beyond that, right? Beyond the finite on-premise focus to the cloud, and then also understanding that we have to have the power of threat intelligence as a part of the whole visibility picture. And of course, simplified operational visibility for awareness and decision-making at that fabric management level. I mentioned solution agility before, and I think it's important to note that Fortinet has implemented cleanly into the harsh as well as office environments for operational technology. So when you're talking about next generation firewalls, switches, and access points, we can adapt to those different environments. I think it's important to realize that the threads that I like to pull in this space are transparency, the ability to design in without incurring latency, the scalability of the solution so that I can manage a growing array of assets, and the speed, which is absolute because I've got to be able to accomplish this business, this maturation of my security business at the speed of business. I love the fact that we're doing more in the purpose-built zone for operational technology. In fact, the latest version, the 60F there with SD-WAN rolled in, it's feature-rich and included as a part of a very rich platform. Love that idea. I think it's the direction that works because more integrated into a single profile device certainly lessens complexity. And a third point here, I think also important and duly of note, is that Fortinet's reputation as a trusted partner is also foundational to tailoring solutions. We don't fly solo. The security fabric diagram that was up earlier showed an API. That API allows us to work with partners to extend the security fabric beyond that which has a Fortinet logo on it. Why is that important? Well, in a moment, I'll give you a characterization of specific partners, but it allows us then to account for the present situation, the services and products that a client may be using. And when you can realize that we have more than 400 technology alliance partners, that allows and integrations, that affords us an ability to do end-to-end solutions with security, performance, and cost savings top of mind. Getting towards the end here, quickly focusing on that top left-hand corner, we have visibility and threat intelligence vendors. What we're talking about here is the integration now of next-generation firewalls, SIM, FortiManager, even FortiSOAR capabilities that allow for visibility within the cyberspace, threat detection, analysis of ICS and IoT traffic, passive industrial analysis, advanced monitoring, and even risk assessments. Lots going on in that space, but our partnership, again, yields the ability to do smart things in that space. Let's wrap up here in the last minute with a sneak peek at a case study, and I think this is compelling. It was a very large automobile manufacturer that Fortinet worked with successfully. They had a high need for visibility in a globally dispersed production site situation. So lots of sites, lots of production environments. You see the numbers there, and a concern over how do I manage these? How can I see them all? Now, bringing to bear our next generation firewall and threat intelligence enabled traffic flow analysis, allowed us to protect against known and unknown threats, OT threats, by understanding and being able to see that traffic we talked about before, the visibility of traffic that is unique to operational technology, and ultimately building trust that yielded visibility for the entire network. You know, these kinds of illustrations grow confidence and trust. And again, when we tie that into the notion of working partnerships, you really get a sense of Fortinet puts the customer first, understanding that cost is important, that productivity is important, and of course our capabilities, which allow us to get a proportional increase in security without having to incur lost production time, very, very important as we move forward. So I promised about 20 minutes, and we're into the last 5, and I think we've got a few minutes for some questions. And I'll pass the baton back over to Cheryl at this time.
Thank you, Rick. A great session and a lot packed into a short bite on visibility. A couple questions from our audience. The first audience member said, you talked about a couple recent headlines you mentioned earlier in the talk. What role did visibility have in the bad actors' ability to actually execute those campaigns that we've recently heard about?
Yeah, so probably not a surprise. I like to talk about this because I think it's a legitimate scenario, and no one wants to prognosticate and be true or win in these events. But it illustrated the ability of the adversary, right, to get on with payload, to disguise or masquerade into a situation where a client or a service was the vehicle to deliver the payload to a widespread distributed set of targets. So traffic visibility was huge, right? Understanding and inspecting every component of that flow of information, including that which is not part of the typical package, because that enables access, and that is tradecraft and technique that's long-standing. The ability to leverage the supply chain, obviously, to get onto a target is a great way to do it. And if I can do it without being detected, it allows me to do a very broad attack, which of course SolarWinds demonstrated.
Thank you, Rick. Our audience is fast and furious with some questions. I'll see how many we can actually get to in the next 3 minutes. So first question came in. A couple of folks are interested in integration that we have talked about with the folks that are in the automation world, Siemens, Rockwell, et cetera. Can you just comment on our partnerships with the automation vendors and how our security is integrated to the things they're doing?
Absolutely. In fact, we talked about partnership before. I focused on visibility today selfishly, but the beauty of what Fortinet is doing is it starts with thinking about designing in. So when we work with our control vendors, and I think that the illustration, which everyone will get a copy of, reflected vendors like Schneider Electric, Siemens, Rockwell Automation, Honeywell. There are a wide variety, and you need to work with each of those to make the solution a part of what they're putting together, because it's expensive to bolt security on. Much less expensive if you design it in so that you get a repeatable process. And then the solution that's supplied by the control vendor then becomes a standard way of doing business. The efficiency you gain and the confidence you gain in how it works and what you're getting for your investment becomes easy to characterize.
And they take advantage of those APIs that you talked about earlier in making that integration an easy part of the solution they're offering.
Absolutely.
A quick question about our product. Someone is asking for the ICS or OT devices, so I'm assuming those are the ruggeds that you talked about.
Yes.
Are they running current 6.4 FortiOS and current SBU?
So I wanted to say yes, but one of the things, I'm an engineer, so if I don't know the answer 100% accurately off the top of my head, I always defer and say, let me make sure of that one, and I will follow up specifically with that. But I believe the answer is yes, but again, I want to be able to say that with 100% confidence. So I will follow up on that question specifically, and we can disseminate that out to the entire audience.
Excellent, thank you. And then maybe just one more before we wrap up and talk about the offer that everyone attending today can take part of. So someone is asking just what type of support is required by security staff for supporting Fortinet's solution? I think they're wanting to know what burden or what extra training and skill level is needed. Can you just comment on Fortinet's approach there?
I absolutely can. In fact, one of the things that I like to share when I'm having broader conversations with executives who are struggling with that is that it is a partnership. Now, we bring our own expertise to the table, of course, because this is a journey. It's not a tactical decision. It's not a quick move. So we're in it to win it with the customer for the long haul. But we also provide training. Our NSE training series, NSE 1 through 8, is provisioned today at no cost. It has been since 2020. That was a response to what was going on and the need to be able to pivot quickly. And so we made that available, and in 2021 continued that practice. So not only can you work with trusted subject matter experts at Fortinet, but you can also have your own workforce and your specialists educated and becoming more fluent in the use of these technologies and capabilities that are designed to raise the bar, right? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to deflect the adversary away, have them focus their energy someplace else.
And if those are interested on Fortinet.com, we are offering some free or complimentary training for different skill levels on the ability for your security staff to up-level their credentials, and that is available complimentary. So we certainly encourage you to check that option out. We have about 7 more questions, but we are out of time. As we promised, this was 30 minutes. Thank you all for those questions. We will provide answers in writing to those that we did not get a chance to address. I do want to mention for everyone who attended today, you are a part of a Nothing But Fortinet initiative, and that initiative is offering you an opportunity to talk bracketology with some of the top minds in basketball. As we know, March is a month with NCAA tournaments. We are offering an opportunity to think about the brackets you might be observing as you watch those tournaments unfold. So anyone attending today will get an invite in the email a few days before March 16th, where you'll jump into a bracketology discussion with Jay, who many of you know has been a long-standing commentator at ESPN, talking about how to select the teams and maybe win big in those brackets. For anyone interested, we have our 2 follow-on sessions, March 11th and March 18th. If you haven't registered for those, go to events.fortinet.com/OT Best Practices Clinic. And for attending the next 2 sessions, you'll get a chance to also participate in the follow-on bracketology sessions with Joe Lenardi and Kenny Smith. For today, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. We really appreciate your engaging, and the questions were marvelous. We will get back to you in writing on responses, and we appreciate your learning around visibility for OT with Fortinet. Have a great day.